In the year 2000, the internet was not just a digital portal to another world, but an opportunity for people to express their visions for what the future should be in ways that were once impossible. Despite brief global panic of a potential apocalypse, this online technology was only getting stronger. Thanks to Cascading Style Sheets, JavaScript, and even Flash media, among other things, it seemed the only limit was the screen itself. With the new year, new century, new millennium, we could finally, truly create the world that we always wanted. This spirit and attitude manifested in ways that really made 2000 a special year for the internet. It was both the death of many archaic online practices, but also the birth of ones we still take for granted today. Now you could get your news, socialize, do your shopping, share your art, make poor investment decisions, and even steal, all from just one place. It was clear that the internet was no longer becoming just a novelty, but rather a very real part of the world with real-life ramifications. And in one way or another, they were about to be felt. We're gonna talk about it all. The good, the bad, the very ugly, by dialing into what was undeniably a turning point in online culture.
Did you know that you can play games on the net? That's right, and it's never been easier. So easy that you can even play it on your cellular device. Millennium is looking stellar, man. But why live in the future when you could live in the past with all the heroes of history? It is a city building and hero collection game, allowing you to build your own civilization starting in the Stone Age and advancing in technology as you go. Wow! As someone who loves being a control freak and telling everyone what to do, I just get so much joy moving around my little minions and having them build me farms, expand territory, and even research me new technologies. And as you're building your own world, you can even get help from time-traveling companions, such as Tesla and Einstein. I was gonna tell you a time travel joke, but you guys didn't like it. Huh, and you can activate your own 4-star hero by earning 40,000 gems or around 10 hours of gameplay. And you can also receive one if you choose to purchase the starter pack. And you can even play with other people over high-speed lines with the Heroes of History's PvP fights. These are available from the Minoan era, with PvP seasons lasting around a week and even allowing you to challenge your personal best in rankings. Sounds all that in a bag of chips. Sign me up! Well, it just so happens that you can in fact sign up today. Use my link on the screen and enter my promo code to unlock your first 5-star hero. That's right, 5 stars. This is an option only available for new players. Come on, man, time's ticking. You gotta do it before the 2000 switch sets all our clocks back to 0. Einstein and Tesla can't help you with that. So go ahead and join me in Heroes of History.
Now, of course, the year 2000 in technology didn't exactly start off all peachy. There certainly were people excited for the new millennium and what kind of things it would bring, but much of it was briefly overshadowed by predictions of a possible doomsday event that would strike New Year's Day due to a massive computer bug. It was known as Y2K. Now, I already did an entire video on Y2K several internet centuries ago, but in short, computers, up until the 90s, were often programmed to log calendar dates with the last 2 digits of a year rather than all 4. So a computer would read 99 instead of 1999. When it would become the year 2000, this would of course read as 00. Since 00 is smaller than 99, the computer would not think it's the year 2000, but instead 1900. This would essentially confuse the entire system and cause massive errors in typical calculations, such as bank interest, business deadlines, air traffic control systems, and so on. On a global scale, this could cause catastrophic failure, with some even predicting power grids shutting off, prison gates unlocking, and even nuclear weapons launching themselves. This created an entire scare among the public, with many people even stocking up on supplies and preparing doomsday bunkers. While much of the Y2K bug and its impact was sensationalized by the media, it was by no means just a doomsday hoax. It was in fact a real problem that was avoided in time, thanks to global efforts and government initiatives that allowed for this programming oversight to be fixed on most machines that were crucial to everyday life. As a result, the impact of Y2K was rather inconsequential. There were some things that were significantly affected, but nothing strong enough to end the world, obviously. So by the time January rolled around, the Y2K panic quickly died out, and people just went back to their regular routines. For many, that included making more contributions to this internet technology to make it an even better, more powerful place. Now at face value, the internet in 2000 still looks quite similar to how it did back in the mid-90s. However, there had been many significant developments since then. They were mostly just under the hood and in many respects would take time to become noticeable on the outside. But when these changes finally expressed themselves, it was a clear night and day difference. You start to see an emergence of this rather three-dimensional, gradient-centric style of design on web pages, and even in the operating systems that complemented them. It was quite a fresh take on the more static, rigid designs of the 90s, but just as influenced by the technology and energy of its time. Just like how much of 90s software primarily focused on simplicity and getting the hang of this new environment, this new Y2K design, as it has been retroactively coined, took advantage of people's newfound familiarity with technology as well as its rapid advancement. Because computer graphics were getting better, people could do more things with it. This gave them the opportunity to not only create a user interface that was easier to navigate because it resembled more like real-life objects, but to also create a clean, idealized version of the world they were living in that was even more realistic than ever before. A very popular style that fell under this Y2K umbrella was one called Aqua, a term coined by Apple during the San Francisco Macworld Expo in January of 2000, where they introduced a new operating system they called macOS X. They called it Aqua because, well, all the gradients and 3D designs that were used made it look like little droplets of water. Now, macOS X remained in its beta stages up until its public launch in 2001, but this brilliant innovation in design really demonstrated where things were heading. It was not the sole influence behind this change, but it was certainly part of it. Microsoft's Windows XP would eventually take this approach in 2001 with its iconic Luna design. You then start to see many other web pages take on a similar look. Some fun examples include Matinee, PlayStation, UEFA, and of course, Apple. Now, these stylistic changes were not monolithic and certainly didn't happen overnight. So there were many mainstream websites that took longer to adapt than others, and still sported their old, more traditional layouts. That's what I think makes the year 2000 a particularly interesting point in online history. It is in many ways that sort of sweet spot between the old 90s internet and the slow adaptation of the dynamic, broadband, social media era of the internet, or what is also known as Web 2.0. Like we mentioned, these aesthetic changes were facilitated by advancing technology, both in hardware and software. A technology from 1996 known as Flash Media was now starting to get a lot of recognition thanks to a new website that was now gaining immense popularity, a site known as Newgrounds. Although it started in the 90s, its popularity didn't truly enter mainstream status until around 2000. It was an online community that hosted things like games, films, audio, and so much more. People could view and interact with other people's creations, and even upload their own for the world to see. And it could all be done within the browser. It was Flash technology that made this possible. Now, I've already done an entire video on Flash technology, but this was one of the many driving forces that pushed the internet out of its exclusively static, fixed environment and allowed for pages to be more lively and more fluid. The internet could now be an even more convincing extension of the real world. This was further complemented by growing technologies like CSS and JavaScript. These once again started a few years prior, but really started to shine in the year 2000. They effectively acted as the bridge between Flash and HTML, allowing the two to work together harmoniously and therefore give users the ultimate interactive experience. In other words, you can effectively use JavaScript to make desired changes to a web page in real time in ways that may fit the Flash media in question. For example, if the website has a shopping cart and you add something to it, it may create a little animation using Flash while using JavaScript to update an item's price. If someone makes a Flash video game where there's an explosion scene, maybe they'll have the windows start bouncing around the screen. Little fun things like that. While it was certainly used as a novelty in many of these situations, it served as a crucial component in making the web easier, more efficient, and more exciting to use. Cascading Style Sheets, or CSS, were a more indirect contribution to this website fluidity, because it made HTML editing much easier to do. Rather than having all the visual attributes of HTML in one convoluted place full of code, CSS moved it into its own separate file, just dedicated to the design, rather than being completely intertwined into the site's functionality. This made editing cleaner and more organized, and even made web pages load faster, due to these CSS files being cached by web browsers, which meant that less data had to be transferred over the net long term. These things allowed for more websites to adapt these dynamic setups and become more capable than they ever were before. This was further reinforced by a new growing technology that allowed for more bandwidth to be transferred over the net in less time, a technology called Broadband. Now in 2000, the supreme online infrastructure was dial-up, which connected computers to each other through phone lines. This was very convenient at the time because pretty much every household in the developed world had a landline system, so they could just plug and dial in right away. But there were trade-offs. Someone could not use the phone while you were on the internet, and vice versa. And of course, as these complex online technologies started to emerge, the demand for bandwidth began to increase. As a result, internet speeds started to feel slower, and dial-up just couldn't catch up with loading these heavy websites. Broadband was the solution to this problem, and it was slowly starting to gain recognition. It primarily came in two flavors: DSL and cable. Remember that phone lines had way less frequencies to choose from because, well, they were designed to just pick up voices, because that was pretty much the only thing that was needed after almost 100 years of use. But the digital subscriber line used more refined versions of these phone lines that could now support more frequencies and bandwidth capacity than before. So now internet access and phone calls could operate simultaneously without interfering with one another, and it could be done faster. But rather than just using phone lines, Broadband also used coaxial cables, the same cable that gives you, well, cable television. These cables were made of better materials that allowed for more bandwidth to be transferred at faster speeds, and allowed for more frequencies to be used for telecommunication. So not only was your internet faster, you could also watch cable TV while using it. Because the number of households with cable at this time was much smaller than ones with phone lines in comparison, it took some time for broadband to take over. The cable was still quickly growing in popularity. It was a huge upgrade in online technology. The internet clearly was showing a lot of promise. People wanted in, both literally and financially. Throughout the end of the 90s, tons of people, including even hedge fund traders, began investing insane amounts of money in these websites the second they became public on the Nasdaq. They started treating these websites effectively like stocks, investing as much as $5 trillion collectively in them. This phenomenon would eventually become known as the dot-com bubble, and it would reach its peak in March of 2000. While some economists predicted that these crazy high evaluations of companies that often operated on a computer in someone's bedroom wasn't exactly practical, many chose to look the other way or just dismiss it entirely. This time it would be different, because something like the internet has never been seen before. During this peak, many users were just on cloud 9, feeling like the millennium brought the world an internet that could just not get any better. They were ultimately right, as this dot-com bubble would eventually burst. Turns out, these online companies could not return profits that justified the amount of money that people invested into them. So investors either pulled out, or these companies ended up somehow spending all that money. A great example of this was Pets.com, an online pet store. Despite receiving insane amounts of money from investors, much of that money was spent on marketing and operating costs, and it could not generate enough profit to make up for it. Because after all, why buy pet supplies online that take several days to ship and arrive in the mail when you could just go to your local pet store and get those same supplies that very same day? Naturally, these dot-coms started going under. Investors saw the nosedive and began to panic sell, which then made matters even worse. The end results were absolutely devastating for the stock market. Some people lost their entire life savings as a result. It was so bad that even some of the top websites in the world at the time significantly suffered and never ended up fully recovering from it. This included AOL's disastrous Time Warner merger and Yahoo's overevaluation and overinvestment into other dot-coms. There were even websites dedicated to listing out all the sites that failed, such as the parody of fastcompany.com called company.com. I like the name. Despite many aspects of the internet experiencing great innovation and overall optimism, the public's faith in it quickly started to change. It wasn't necessarily that people were less trustful of the internet as a technology, but rather in how it was currently being used. That was what needed to change. This major event, along with the other things we just talked about, like Flash Media, CSS, and JavaScript, is what contributed to the internet's eventual transformation into Web 2.0. It was essentially a reconstruction era, because now websites couldn't just be built around novelty and hype, but they actually had to have utility and a reason for people to return to them. With Yahoo now lagging behind, a new, much more innovative search engine called Google enters the picture, and within a couple years, would eventually become the most visited website. Another thing that brings people back to a website is people. We are very sociable creatures, and so in 2000, people-centric websites like Diary X, Friends Reunited, and DeviantArt would harbor communities that would act as early examples to what would soon be known as social media. Now, this concept was not necessarily new in 2000, but you could argue that the dot-com bubble was the catalyst that brought it to immense popularity throughout the rest of the decade. Because despite all the craziness, people knew the internet was not going anywhere, and they used it to their advantage, even in ways that were legally questionable. It is this same year that a website called Napster is gaining insane popularity. Although it launched the year prior, it is in 2000 when it really starts taking off. That's because it allowed you to download pretty much any song you wanted for free. What was incredibly innovative about Napster was that it basically hosted content all across the internet through something called peer-to-peer file sharing. Instead of having all the songs hosted on one website, you would instead just download it from another Napster user's computer, and that could be thousands of them with the same song. This made it much more difficult for companies to take this content down, and so Napster continued to rapidly grow as a piracy tool. By 2000, it was basically a part of mainstream pop culture, even being referenced on television.
I'm starting to like this whole sharing thing. Hey boys!
For a long time, it was a game of cat and mouse, but eventually things did catch up to them, and Napster was shut down in 2001. But its innovation and influence throughout its lifetime did not go unnoticed, and it most certainly was not in vain. This P2P protocol that the program popularized would end up being incorporated into legal applications, such as Skype, which used it to more effectively transmit computer calls. And of course, as bandwidth access got better, programs like LimeWire and Kazaa would use P2P file sharing to host things beyond just music. Some programs would take this even further by developing an even more decentralized version of P2P known as BitTorrent, popularized by the application of the same name. The online music scene was briefly a bit drier once Napster was out of the picture, but Apple decided to make a compromise. They decided to create a program that would allow you to rip any number of songs from your CD and put it on your computer. Also, if you wanted to get a specific song that you didn't currently own, you could buy that one song for just 99 cents, as opposed to having to buy the whole album first. This program would be released by Apple in January of 2001, a program called iTunes. Very shortly after, they introduced their latest product called the iPod, which would let you carry that music anywhere you went. This is what the year 2000 would eventually bring us. It had its trials and tribulations, but it ultimately showed that the internet and this technology was here to stay. Not only could it withstand virtually anything, but it could learn from it and create something even better out of it. Whether it was for better or for worse, things were never going to be the same going forward. And that was going to be an experience that had never been seen and would never be seen again. If you would like to learn all about the most popular website in 2000, Yahoo, I did an entire video about that right here, as well as related videos in the description. A special thanks to my Patreon supporters. Check out patreon.com/NationSquid for ad-free and exclusive content. Buying me a coffee is very appreciated too. Thank you for watching, everyone.